the relentless sun of rural Nebraska, a relentless golden orb in a sky of endless blue, beat down upon the parched fields of Ezekiel Zeke Thorne's farm. Dust, fine as flour, coated everything. The weather-beaten planks of the farmhouse, the rusted skeletal remains of an old tractor, even the very air Zeke breathed. He was an old man now, his hands gnarled and perpetually stained with the earth, his back stooped from decades of wrestling with the unforgiving land. The silence of the vast plains was his constant companion, a presence that pressed in on him, especially during the lonely ritual of his evening meal. Tonight, as with most nights, supper was a simple affair, a bowl of lukewarm stew, thick with homegrown potatoes and what little meat he could afford. The cracked porcelain plate sat on the worn pine table, its surface scarred by years of use. The only sounds in the small, dimly lit kitchen were the mournful whistle of the wind through a loose pane in the window and the distant hoot of an owl, a poignant echo of his solitude. No lively chatter, no clatter of extra plates, no warmth of another presence. His wife, Sarah, had been gone for 15 years, and with her, the vibrant color had drained from his world, leaving behind a monochrome existence of survival. The farmhouse itself felt like a ghost, its floorboards groaning under the weight of memory, its empty rooms whispering of laughter and life long past. Outside, his ancient pickup truck, a faithful companion for decades, sat stubbornly silent in the driveway, its engine refusing to turn over, a metallic symbol of his fading fortunes. Despite the creeping arthritis in his knuckles and the dull ache that permanently resided in his lower back, Zeke possessed a stubborn resilience, a quiet dignity forged in hardship. His own farm was teetering on the brink, his fields brittle and fallow, yet he still found the strength to extend a helping hand. Just yesterday, his elderly neighbor, Martha Henderson, a widow even more isolated than himself, had called, her voice thin with despair. Her ancient barbed wire fence, separating her small pasture from the highway, had finally collapsed after a harsh winter storm, leaving her 2 scrawny cows vulnerable. Zeke, without a moment's hesitation, had driven his battered, but still functioning, old sedan a backup for when the truck truly gave up the ghost over to Martha's property. He spent the better part of a day, under the merciless sun, wrestling with rusted wire and splintered posts. Each swing of the hammer sent a jolt of pain up his arm. Each bend to thread the wire was an agony for his spine. Martha had offered him a glass of sweet tea and a plate of her famously dry cookies, her eyes brimming with gratitude. "Ezekiel, you're a godsend. I don't know what I'd do without you." He'd waved her off with a weary smile. "Just doing what neighbors do, Martha. Don't you worry about it." He'd politely declined her invitation to stay for supper, knowing the precious daylight hours were slipping away, and he had his own crumbling world to contend with. The fence was fixed, Martha's cows were safe, and Zeke returned home, his body aching, but his spirit buoyed by the quiet satisfaction of a good deed done, completely selfless and without expectation of reward. It was this simple act of kindness, this unwavering commitment to decency, in the face of his own despair, that marked him. His solitary existence, however, held a peculiar, carefully guarded secret, a hidden world that few, if any, in the surrounding farming community knew about. Tucked away in a dusty corner of his cramped study, amidst stacks of agricultural journals and seed catalogs, lay a collection of old, well-worn books on cinema history. These weren't glossy, contemporary coffee table books, but rather academic texts, tattered memoirs of pioneering directors, and critiques of classic Hollywood films, particularly those that celebrated the raw beauty of rural America. He would spend hours, hunched over a flickering lamp, lost in the narratives of cinematic masters, analyzing their use of light, shadow, and composition. Among these treasured volumes was a thick, leather-bound notebook, its pages filled with Sarah's meticulous handwriting and intricate sketches, Sarah, his beloved wife, had been a budding film student in her youth, an anomaly in their farming community. She had harbored dreams of moving to California, of capturing the stark beauty of their land on film, of telling stories through the lens. Life, however, had led her back to the farm, to him. And her artistic aspirations had been quietly set aside, never truly extinguished, but merely dormant. Her notebook was a window into her unfulfilled dreams, detailed diagrams of camera angles designed to highlight the vastness of the prairie, elaborate lighting schemes to capture the golden hour over the cornfields, and eloquent notes on how to use natural elements, a gnarled tree, a decaying barn, a rippling stream, to create powerful, evocative cinematic backdrops. Zeke had never been able to part with it. He would often trace Sarah's delicate sketches with a calloused finger, a silent communion with the ghost of her artistic spirit. He absorbed her insights, her keen eye for detail, her understanding of storytelling through visuals. It was a private grief, a cherished love, and a quiet, almost scholarly appreciation for an art form that felt so alien to his daily life of dirt and toil. He never spoke of it to anyone. Not to Martha. Not to the gruff-wag, pragmatic farmers at the local feed store. Certainly not to his bank manager. They wouldn't understand. They saw him as just an old farmer, struggling to keep his head above water. They didn't see the man who, in the quiet solitude of his evenings, could dissect the framing of a John Ford Western, or articulate the emotional resonance of a close-up shot from an early silent film. This hidden passion was a secret tribute to Sarah, a quiet promise to keep her dreams alive, even as his own felt on the verge of extinction. The community, small and insular, held its own unwritten rules. In the nearby town of Harmony Creek, population 783, where the general store doubled as the post office, and the diner served as the town's unofficial parliament, Zeke was viewed with a mixture of pity and quiet respect. Pity for his struggles, respect for his resilience. But any suggestion of his eccentricities, especially his silent, almost academic fascination with movies, would be met with raised eyebrows and knowing glances. Poor old Zeke, they'd murmur over lukewarm coffee. Lost his wife, now losing the farm, and that strange hobby of his, probably just a way to cope with being alone. They saw only the surface, the worn-out farmer, not the hidden depths of his intellect or the quiet sorrow of his unfulfilled shared dream. His farm, known locally as the Thorne Homestead, had been in his family for 5 generations. Each cracked timber, each faded paint chip, each rust-colored furrow in the fields held a story, a memory woven into the very fabric of his existence. It wasn't just land, it was his lineage, his identity, the physical manifestation of generations of hard work, triumphs, and heartbreaks. The possibility of losing it was not merely a financial catastrophe. It was an amputation of his very soul, a final crushing blow to the quiet dignity he had so fiercely tried to maintain against the relentless tide of time and misfortune. The dust that coated his world felt heavier, imbued with the unspoken weight of impending loss. The quiet before the storm. The morning sun, usually a welcome beacon of hope on the Nebraska plains, felt like a cruel spotlight bearing down on Zeke's weathered face. He sat at his kitchen table, the half-eaten bowl of stew from last night still before him, staring at the envelope. It wasn't just an envelope. It was a death knell, a stark white rectangle containing the final, crushing blow. The logo of Heartland Mutual Bank, crisp and authoritative, seemed to mock the rough-hewn simplicity of his life. His hands, usually so steady when mending fences or tending to a stubborn engine, trembled as he picked it up. He already knew what it contained. The previous letters had been increasingly terse, each one a tightening noose. This one, he knew, would be the last. His vision, dimmed by age, focused on the bold, unforgiving words: final notice of foreclosure, payment in full, due in 30 days, or the farm, the Thorne Homestead, 5 generations of sweat and tears, of birth and death, of joy and sorrow, would be repossessed. A cold dread seeped into his bones, colder than any Nebraska winter. It wasn't just the loss of property, it was the loss of his entire world. The physical embodiment of his ancestors' struggles and his own dwindling dreams. The small, neat handwriting of Sarah, preserved in the old recipe books, the faint scent of her lavender sachets in the dresser drawers, the subtle creak of the porch swing where they used to watch the sunsets. All of it would be stripped away, sold off to strangers who saw only acreage and market value, not the soul of a place. He pushed himself up from the table, his knees protesting with a dull ache. He walked through the silent rooms, his footsteps echoing hollowly. In the living room, a faded photograph on the mantelpiece showed a younger Zeke and Sarah, laughing, their arms around each other, against a backdrop of vibrant, healthy cornfields. The contrast with his current reality was a punch to the gut. The years of drought, the plummeting commodity prices, the rising cost of feed and seed, the ever-increasing interest rates, they had all conspired against him, chipping away at his meager savings, forcing him to take out loans he could never hope to repay. He had fought. God knew he had fought, with every fiber of his being, against the relentless tide of economic hardship. But now, he was at the end of his rope. Anger, sharp and bitter, flared within him. Anger at the uncaring system, at the fickle weather, at his own inability to outrun the inevitable. But beneath the anger was a profound sense of helplessness. What could an old man, alone on a failing farm, do against the might of a bank? He stared out the window, at the cracked earth, at the withered remnants of what should have been a bountiful harvest. The very land seemed to mock his futile efforts. He retreated to his small study, the familiar comfort of Sarah's film books offering a momentary reprieve. He picked up her old notebook, tracing the elegant curve of her handwriting. A loose, yellowed photograph slipped from between the pages. Sarah, radiant and youthful, clutching an antique film camera, her eyes bright with unfulfilled dreams. He remembered the day she bought it, a rare extravagance, a symbol of her passion. He remembered her talking excitedly about capturing the soul of the prairie, about finding the cinematic in the everyday. He had listened, indulged her, but never truly understood the depth of her artistic yearning, lost as he was in the practicalities of farming. Now, he saw it, a flicker of that same yearning within himself, the desperate need to preserve something, to keep a part of Sarah, a part of their shared life, from being erased. He considered his options, bleak as they were. He could try to sell off his last remaining cattle, a handful of scrawny longhorns, at the livestock auction. Maybe the old Ford truck. If he could coax it to start one last time, it wouldn't be enough. He knew it wouldn't be enough. The thought of a public auction, of strangers pawing through his life's meager possessions, made his stomach churn, the humiliation of it all. He sat slumped in his armchair, the foreclosure notice clutched in his hand, the paper crinkling under the pressure of his despair. The dream of the Thorne homestead, of generations of farmers living off this land, was dying, and he was powerless to stop it. It was precisely at this moment of utter desolation, just as the afternoon sun began its slow descent, painting the dusty horizon in hues of orange and purple, that the silence of the farm was shattered. The distant rumble of an engine, too smooth, too powerful to be a local farmer's pickup, grew steadily louder. A cloud of dust, far larger and more dramatic than anything a passing car would kick up, billowed down his long, unpaved driveway. Zeke peered out the window, squinting against the late afternoon glare. A sleek, obsidian-black SUV, far too opulent for these back roads, glided to a silent stop in front of his dilapidated farmhouse. It looked utterly out of place, like a polished gemstone dropped in a pile of gravel. He watched, bewildered, as the passenger door opened. A young woman, impossibly elegant in a tailored linen suit, stepped out. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe, yet stylish, bun, and oversized sunglasses obscured her eyes. She carried a sleek tablet in one hand and moved with an air of brisk efficiency. Behind her, a hulking man, built like a brick wall and dressed in an equally sharp dark suit, emerged from the driver's side, his face grim and unreadable. They looked like creatures from another world, utterly alien to the dust and struggle of his farm. The woman removed her sunglasses, revealing intelligent, assessing eyes that scanned the weathered farmhouse, the sagging barn, the parched fields, with a detached, professional air. She wasn't looking at a home. She was looking at a set of possibilities. She approached the porch, her footsteps surprisingly light on the creaking wood. Zeke remained rooted to his spot by the window, a silent, watchful sentinel. "Mr. Ezekiel Thorne," she called out, her voice clear and carrying across the quiet yard, surprisingly warm despite her polished demeanor. "My name is Amelia Vance. I'm a location scout for Celestial Pictures." She gestured vaguely towards the hulking man behind her. "This is Mr. Davies, our head of security." Zeke slowly opened the screen door, its hinges groaning in protest. He stepped out onto the porch, the worn wood cool beneath his bare feet. He eyed them suspiciously. Film crew, Hollywood. What in God's name would Hollywood want with his dying farm? He probably looked like a scarecrow, his clothes faded and patched, his face a roadmap of sun and worry. Amelia's eyes, however, lingered on the unique character of the farm, the way the light hit the ancient oak tree, the weathered texture of the barn's siding, the quiet, almost melancholic beauty of the untamed prairie stretching out behind it. She saw something beyond the decay, something raw and authentic. "We're looking for a specific kind of location for a major motion picture," Amelia continued, her voice measured. "A period drama, set in the American heartland during the Dust Bowl era. We've scouted dozens of farms across the Midwest, but none of them have quite the untouched authenticity, the genuine feel of history, that yours does." Zeke merely grunted, still trying to process the surreal nature of the encounter. A major movie. His farm. The words seemed utterly incongruous, like a vivid dream breaking through the harsh reality of his impending foreclosure. He probably looked like he was suffering from heat stroke. Amelia, sensing his skepticism, offered a professional smile. "We'd like to offer you a substantial sum, Mr. Thorne, to use your farm as our primary set for several months." A substantial sum. The words hung in the air. Impossible. Unbelievable. He thought of the foreclosure notice, still in his hand. A desperate, illogical spark of hope ignited within him, quickly followed by a crushing wave of cynicism. This had to be a joke, a cruel trick of fate. But the sleek SUV, the polished professionals, the very audacity of their appearance on his desolate doorstep, it was too real to be dismissed as a delusion. This unexpected, bizarre encounter was the catalyst. It was a lifeline thrown from an alien world, a proposition so utterly beyond his realm of comprehension that it jolted him from his despair. The bank's final notice, once a definitive end, now felt like a desperate challenge. He was on a new path, a path utterly unexpected and fraught with unknowns, but one from which he knew, with a strange certainty, he could not, and would not, turn back. His farm, his legacy, his very future, now hung precariously in the balance, entangled with the glittering, unpredictable world of Hollywood. The sleek, dark SUV sat like an alien anomaly in front of Zeke's dilapidated farmhouse, its polished surface reflecting the dusty, forgotten landscape. Amelia Vance, with her sharp, appraising eyes and the no-nonsense demeanor of a seasoned professional, represented a world utterly removed from Zeke's. Beside her, Victor Hayes, the production manager, a man whose expensive suit couldn't quite conceal a certain avarice in his gaze, stood with his arms crossed, his expression a mixture of impatience and thinly veiled disdain. He saw only a derelict property, a potential budget sinkhole, and an old man ripe for exploitation. "Mr. Thorne, as I explained," Amelia began, her voice smooth and professional. "We're looking for a period-accurate farm for a major motion picture. Dust Bowl Requiem. Our director, Ms. Isabella Rossi, is known for her meticulous attention to historical detail. Your farm, despite its rustic charm, has a certain authenticity." Victor snorted, a barely audible sound. Authenticity. It looks like it's about to fall down. We'd need to pour a fortune into making it safe, let alone camera ready. Walls need shoring up. The barn's a fire hazard. And frankly, the whole place needs a good power wash. This isn't some art house indie. Ms. Vance, we have a schedule and a budget. He emphasized the word budget with a pointed glance at Zeke, as if already calculating how much he could shave off any potential deal. Amelia ignored Victor, her gaze still fixed on Zeke. "We're prepared to offer a location fee. Mr. Thorne, a substantial one, for a few months of exclusive use." She named a figure that, while sounding impressive to Zeke, was barely a fraction of what a major studio typically paid for prime locations. She was testing the waters, gauging his desperation. Zeke's heart gave a hopeful flutter, then sank. It was a lot of money, more than he'd seen in years. Enough to pay off the immediate debt, but it wouldn't secure the farm's long-term future, not with the ongoing costs and the parched land. He instinctively knew they were lowballing him, trying to take advantage of his evident hardship. "Well, now," Zeke drawled, his voice slow and deliberate, a trick he'd learned over decades of haggling at the livestock market. "This old place might look like it's seen better days, but it's still got good bones, and a history you won't find just anywhere. What exactly are you looking to do with it?" Amelia pulled out her tablet, displaying concept art and rough sketches. "The film depicts a family struggling through the worst of the Dust Bowl. We need authenticity. The barn, for instance, would be central to several key scenes. We were thinking of opening up the far wall, perhaps, for a wider shot, to really capture the desolation of the landscape, and maybe adding a false facade to the house to make it appear more ramshackle." As Amelia spoke, outlining plans to alter or even demolish parts of his cherished, albeit crumbling, structures, a strange sensation stirred within Zeke. It wasn't just the violation of his home, it was the artistic sacrilege of it all. He thought of Sarah's meticulous sketches, her notes on how natural light transformed a scene, her insistence on preserving authenticity. "Hold on a minute. Ma'am," Zeke interrupted, his voice gaining a surprising firmness. Victor snorted again, clearly annoyed by the old man's temerity. "You want desolation? You don't need to knock down walls. You see that window there, in the main barn? The one with the broken pane," he pointed with a gnarled finger. "At dawn, the light hits that just right, creates a single, stark beam, thick with dust motes. You angle your camera there," he gestured with an imaginary lens, "and you get desolation. Pure, unadulterated, right out of a Dorothea Lange photograph. No need for a wider shot or to change the structure. You use what's there. That's how the old masters did it." Amelia paused, her tablet still in her hand, her expression one of genuine surprise. She looked from the window Zeke indicated to the barn, then back to Zeke. A flicker of something she hadn't expected in her eyes. Professional curiosity. Her assistant, a young woman named Clara, who had been quietly taking notes, paused her typing, her head tilted, listening intently. Victor, however, let out a dismissive laugh. "Dorothea Lange. What is this? Film school. Look, old man, we're on a schedule. We can't rely on the sun and some old photo. We need controllable light, sound stages, professional rigging. We'll just knock out the wall and put up our own lights." He turned to Amelia, an exasperated sigh escaping him. "See? Amelia, this is what I mean. He's stuck in the past. We need to move on." He subtly caught the eye of his secretary, a sharp-faced young man named Brad, who was hovering nearby, and gave a slight nod towards a particularly prominent crack in the barn's foundation. Brad immediately pulled out his phone, snapping a picture, a silent signal that Victor was compiling a list of defects to leverage during negotiations. But Amelia wasn't listening to Victor. She had walked towards the barn, her eyes fixed on the window Zeke had pointed out. She imagined the morning light, the dust motes. She had spent years studying classical cinematography, revering the very techniques Zeke was describing. His words resonated with a truth that Victor's pragmatic, destructive approach lacked. "Mr. Thorne," she said, turning back to him, a new respect in her voice. How do you know about that?" Zeke hesitated. The urge to dismiss it, to say it was just common sense, was strong. But then he remembered Sarah's face, alive with passion as she discussed the subtle power of natural light. This was her legacy, her voice speaking through him. "My wife, Sarah," he said, a distant look in his eyes. She studied film, loved the old pictures, had a real eye for it, taught me a thing or two." He gestured vaguely towards the house, towards the hidden study with Sarah's notebook. He wasn't deliberately boasting. He was simply compelled by a deeper, almost sacred, impulse to honor Sarah's memory and her hidden talent. Amelia's eyes widened, a dawning comprehension in their depths. A film student in rural Nebraska, decades ago. That was fascinating. She saw not just a farmer, but a keeper of a forgotten artistic lineage. Victor, however, saw only an old man rambling about his dead wife, a distraction from the negotiations. Their conversation continued, Amelia tentatively asking more questions about Zeke's unexpected insights. And Zeke, emboldened by her genuine interest, began to elaborate. He described how the subtle tilt of the farmhouse porch roof could create the perfect shadowed foreground for a scene of despair, how the gnarled branches of the old oak tree could frame a shot to symbolize resilience against the elements, referencing iconic scenes from The Grapes of Wrath and Days of Heaven. His detailed, almost academic understanding of cinematic composition, lighting, and narrative through visuals was utterly shocking to Amelia. He wasn't just quoting, he was analyzing, interpreting, offering solutions that were both artistically profound and surprisingly practical. Victor's face tightened with irritation. This wasn't going as planned. The old man was supposed to be desperate, easy to bully. Instead, he was lecturing them on cinematography. "Look, Mr. Thorne," Victor interjected, his voice sharp. "We don't need an on-set consultant. We have a highly paid production design team. We just need a location. Are you going to take our offer, or are we going to waste everyone's time here?" He gestured impatiently to Brad, who was now meticulously documenting every peeling paint chip and loose shingle on his tablet. Unbeknownst to Zeke, a subtle campaign was already brewing in Harmony Creek. Earl Johnson, a successful but deeply narrow-minded farmer from a neighboring property, had spotted the black SUV earlier in the day. Earl, who prided himself on his shrewd business dealings and viewed Zeke's struggles as a personal failing, immediately suspected foul play. He saw the city folk as con artists and Zeke as a naive old fool. "Heard a fancy car went down to Zeke Thorne's place today," Earl drawled to a small crowd gathered outside the general store, his voice low but carrying. "Hollywood folk, they say, probably trying to pull a fast one on old Zeke. Man's been a bit off ever since Sarah passed. Talking to himself, staring at the sky, probably lost his marbles, trying to act all high and mighty with those movie folks." His words, laced with envy and prejudice, quickly spread through the small town. The image of Zeke as a doddering old fool, easily manipulated, or worse, as someone trying to swindle a big city film crew, began to take root. Earl, fueled by a self-righteous belief that he was protecting the town from outsiders, subtly encouraged the rumors, enjoying the attention and the chance to subtly diminish Zeke in the eyes of the community. Zeke felt the weight of Victor's disdain, the subtle pressure to conform. He also knew, instinctively, that the whispers from his neighbors, the knowing glances and hushed conversations, would soon follow him. He was not just fighting for his farm. He was fighting for his dignity, for the quiet legacy of Sarah's forgotten dreams. He had revealed a part of himself he had kept hidden for decades, and now that vulnerability was exposed to the harsh light of judgment. The path ahead was fraught with obstacles, both external and internal, but there was no turning back now. His farm, the repository of his entire life, was on the line, and he would fight for it with every ounce of wisdom and resilience he possessed. The calendar on Zeke's kitchen wall, a gift from Martha with cheerful pictures of kittens, mocked him with its rapidly diminishing squares. Each passing day brought the dreaded foreclosure date closer, a relentless countdown to the loss of everything he held dear. The bank's final decision loomed like a storm cloud on the horizon, threatening to swallow the Thorne homestead whole. This wasn't just a financial battle. It was a desperate struggle for his very identity, a fight to prove the worth of his land and, by extension, himself. The presence of the film crew, even in their preliminary scouting phase, had become a bizarre, almost surreal, backdrop to his mounting anxiety. Amelia Vance, the location scout, continued to visit, her genuine fascination with Zeke's insights into cinematography becoming increasingly evident. She would listen intently as he described how the morning mist could create a mystical haze over the fields, or how the shadows cast by the barn at sunset could evoke a sense of poignant nostalgia. Her eyes, intelligent and artistic, seemed to truly see the cinematic potential in his rundown farm, a potential that even he, in his darkest moments, sometimes doubted. But Amelia's growing belief in Zeke was tempered by the ever-present, sneering skepticism of Victor Hayes. Victor, the production manager, viewed Zeke not as a potential asset but as an obstacle, an old fool trying to wring more money out of a dilapidated property. He saw Zeke's cinematic wisdom as a cynical ploy, a thinly veiled attempt to inflate his asking price. Victor's goal was simple: secure the location as cheaply as possible, regardless of the artistic merit or human cost. He used every trick in the book, subtly planting doubt with Amelia about Zeke's mental state, exaggerating the structural deficiencies of the farm, and even discreetly threatening to pull the entire production to a rival location if Zeke didn't comply with their generous initial offer. "Look, Mr. Thorne," Victor had announced during one particularly tense negotiation session on the porch, his voice oozing false cordiality. "We understand this place holds sentimental value, but sentiment doesn't pay the bills. We have other options, farms that are frankly in much better condition, for a fraction of what you seem to be hinting at. We're offering you a lifeline here. Take it, or risk losing everything." He gestured dismissively at the cracked porch railing, as if to underscore his point about the farm's decaying state. Adding to Zeke's immense pressure was the insidious spread of rumors throughout Harmony Creek. Expertly fanned by Earl Johnson, Earl, the prosperous but mean-spirited neighbor, couldn't stand the idea of Zeke, a struggling farmer, potentially striking it rich. He saw it as an affront to his own hard-earned success and a disruption to the town's established pecking order. Heard old Zeke's trying to fleece those city slickers. Earl would tell anyone who'd listen at the Harmony Creek diner, his voice loud enough to carry, talking about camera angles and fancy lighting. "Man's gone senile, I tell you. Probably just trying to inflate the price of that crumbling old heap before the bank takes it anyway." He'd chuckle, a self-satisfied sound, and his words, laced with envy and small-town prejudice, cemented the image of Zeke as either a deluded old man or a conniving cheat in the minds of many. Even Martha, though loyal to Zeke, had approached him with a worried frown. "Ezekiel, folks are talking. Just be careful with those Hollywood types, won't you?" Zeke was truly alone. He bore the weight of the impending foreclosure, the manipulative tactics of Victor, and the quiet judgment of his own community. Amelia was his only true ally, but even her hands were tied by the studio's strict protocols and Victor's control over the budget. He felt like he was standing in the eye of a hurricane, with powerful forces converging to tear his world apart. The ultimate test arrived, as often happens, with a bureaucratic inevitability. A letter from Heartland Mutual Bank arrived, stark and unyielding. A final meeting was scheduled for the following Friday. It wouldn't just be the bank's stern representative, Mr. Harrison, but also the bank's legal team, ready to finalize the foreclosure papers. And, in a move orchestrated by Victor Hayes to put maximum pressure on Zeke, the director of Dust Bowl Requiem, Isabella Rossi herself, along with Amelia, Victor, and their respective lawyers, would also be present. The meeting was set to take place not in some sterile city office, but right there, on the Thorne homestead, in Zeke's own living room. The farmhouse itself was to be the symbolic arena, the battlefield where the fate of his ancestral land would be decided. Victor's hidden agenda was clear: force Zeke into a corner. He intended to leverage the looming foreclosure to drive down the location fee, perhaps even offer a pittance in exchange for immediate access. Knowing Zeke would be desperate, he had subtly suggested to Isabella that the farm was a problematic location, requiring extensive and costly modifications, making it seem like a favor to even consider it. He hinted that Zeke was difficult and uncooperative. The day of the meeting dawned clear and cold, the morning light sharp and unforgiving. Zeke, dressed in his best, albeit still faded, overalls, felt a tremor in his hands as he brewed a pot of weak coffee. His living room, usually a haven of quiet memories, felt suddenly small and vulnerable, exposed to the judging eyes of strangers. The antique mantelpiece, the worn armchair, the very air thick with the scent of old wood and dried lavender, all of it was under scrutiny. The first to arrive was Mr. Harrison from Heartland Mutual, a man whose tailored suit seemed too tight for his self-importance. He was accompanied by two stern-faced lawyers, their briefcases thick with legal documents. They sat on Zeke's worn couch, their expressions unyielding. Then came the Hollywood contingent. A sleek caravan of black SUVs pulled up, disgorging a small army of impeccably dressed individuals. Isabella Rossi, the acclaimed director, was a woman of fierce intellect and piercing artistic vision. She surveyed the room with an intensity that made Zeke feel both exposed and, oddly, seen. Amelia, beside her, offered Zeke a small, reassuring smile, a silent gesture of solidarity. Victor Hayes, however, walked in with an air of smug superiority, his eyes darting around, calculating. His lawyer, a sharp-suited woman with a predatory gleam in her eye, immediately began whispering to him. The air in the small living room grew thick with tension. Mr. Harrison, with a polite but firm tone, laid out the bank's position, the overdue payments, the missed deadlines, the inevitable foreclosure if the debt wasn't paid in full. Today, he presented the papers, cold and official. Then Victor spoke up, his voice smooth as oil. And regarding the location, Ms. Rossi, he addressed the director, subtly positioning himself as the expert. As you can see, this property, it has challenges, significant structural issues, safety concerns. Our initial offer, while generous for a property in this condition, is our final offer. We simply can't justify a higher investment for a location that requires so much work. Unless, of course, Mr. Thorne can demonstrate some unique, irreplaceable value beyond just rustic charm. He stressed the word demonstrate, a subtle challenge in his tone. Isabella Rossi, a woman of few words but sharp observations, turned her piercing gaze on Zeke. She had heard Victor's veiled warnings about Zeke's delusions and eccentricities, but she had also noticed Amelia's quiet advocacy, her unusual respect for the old farmer. She was an artist, and she sensed there was more to Zeke than met the eye. "Mr. Thorne," Isabella said, her voice surprisingly gentle, cutting through Victor's bluster. "Amelia has mentioned your insights into cinematic light and composition. Is there anything about this farm, any specific spot, any unique feature that you believe could truly elevate our film? Something that only you could see?" The question hung in the air, a final, desperate plea from the universe. This was it. His chance. His only chance to save the farm. He had to prove his worth, not just as a farmer, but as a keeper of artistic vision. Victor Hayes leaned back, a sneer playing on his lips, confident the old man would falter. The bank representatives watched impassively, their pens ready to sign the foreclosure papers. The clock was ticking, the weight of generations pressing down on him. Zeke felt a surge of fear, but also a fierce determination. He would not let Sarah's dreams, or his own, die here. He would show them the unseen magic of his land. The silence in Zeke's living room, after Isabella Rossi's challenging question, was thick with anticipation. Victor Hayes wore a smug, almost imperceptible smirk, confident that the old farmer would finally crack under pressure. The bank representatives remained impassive, their faces set in stone, their pens hovering over the foreclosure documents. The fate of the Thorne homestead, and generations of memories, hung precariously in the balance. Zeke looked at Isabella, then at Amelia, whose eyes held a desperate, silent plea for him to succeed. He felt the weight of his ancestors, the silent presence of Sarah, urging him on. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, not in defeat, but in deep concentration, accessing a lifetime of observations, a hidden reservoir of knowledge about this land, about light, and about the magic of the moving picture that Sarah had imparted. When he opened his eyes, the weariness seemed to have vanished, replaced by a quiet, fierce intensity. He didn't speak in grand cinematic terms, but in the language of the land, imbued with artistic precision. "Come with me," he said, his voice stronger than before, a low rumble that commanded attention. "I'll show you." He led them out of the living room, past the skeptical bank representatives and a visibly annoyed Victor, who muttered something about wasting daylight. Isabella, intrigued, followed, with Amelia and her assistant, Clara, close behind. They walked across the dusty yard, past the silent pickup truck, towards the dilapidated barn that Victor had so readily dismissed as a fire hazard. "You want desolation?" Zeke began, stopping just outside the barn's main entrance, his gaze sweeping across the parched fields that stretched to the horizon. "That ain't just emptiness. That's a story." He pointed to the far corner of the barn, where a single, broken window pane allowed a sliver of sunlight to pierce the gloom within. "Tomorrow, just before sunrise, the light hits that window just so. It don't fill the barn, mind you. It cuts right through. A single, sharp beam, thick with dust, like hope, fighting to get through the despair." He continued, his words painting a vivid picture. "You set your camera low, right about here." He gestured to a patch of hard-packed dirt. "And you catch that beam. You put a figure, silhouetted, in front of it. A farmer, maybe, looking out, his back to the light. You don't see his face, but you see the weight of the world on his shoulders. The dust in that light. That ain't just dirt. That's the soul of the Dust Bowl. That's the grit, the struggle, and the shadows. Those ain't just dark spots. Those are the unspoken fears, the hungry mouths, the land turning against you." Amelia, her tablet forgotten, watched him with wide, captivated eyes. Isabella Rossi, initially reserved, leaned forward, her artistic mind already visualizing the scene. She understood the profound simplicity of his vision, the raw truth in his words, and the wind. Zeke continued, his voice taking on a lyrical quality. "You hear it now, just a whisper, but you bring your microphones low, by the dry weeds, and that whisper becomes a moan. The sound of a dying dream. That's your score. Right there, the music of this land." He picked up a handful of dry soil, letting it sift through his fingers. "You filmed this. You don't need special effects. This is real." Victor, growing increasingly agitated, finally interjected. "Mr. Thorne, with all due respect, we have a budget for lighting. We don't have time to wait for perfect sunrise and the exact angle of dust. And we certainly can't shoot a critical scene based on poetry." He turned to Isabella. "Ms. Rossi, we need practical solutions. We need to recreate a scene. Quickly. to gauge the viability of this location, something that demonstrates his expertise, if you will. Isabella, ignoring Victor's thinly veiled contempt, turned back to Zeke. Mr. Thorne, Victor is right. We need a practical demonstration. We need to see your vision brought to life. Can you direct a small mock-up scene for us? Here. Now. Using your insights. Zeke paused, his gaze sweeping over the production team. He saw the set designers, the lighting technicians, the camera crew, all standing by, their faces a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. This was it, the gauntlet. His own land, his own home, was the symbolic arena where he had to prove himself, not just to the film crew, but to the bank, to his neighbors, and most importantly, to himself. All right, Zeke said, a faint smile touching his lips. You want practical, I'll show you practical. But you'll need some help. We'll recreate the famous leaving home scene from The Plow That Broke the Plains. He saw Isabella's eyes light up. It was one of the most iconic Dust Bowl films ever made. A black and white masterpiece. Give me your chief production designer, your head of lighting, and your main camera operator. And he looked pointedly at Victor. A time frame. I don't have all day. Nor does my bank. Victor, caught off guard by Zeke's unexpected confidence, scoffed. All right, old man, you want a challenge. Fine, you have exactly 3 hours. We'll set up some basic equipment. If you can recreate that scene to Ms. Rossi's satisfaction, using your unique methods, we'll reevaluate our offer. If not, he left the threat hanging in the air, a silent reminder of the impending foreclosure. His lawyer, the sharp-faced Brad, pulled out his tablet, setting a timer, his finger hovering over the start button. The challenge had been thrown. The pressure was immense. The bank's representatives, who had followed them out, watched impassively, their presence a stark reminder of the ticking clock. Zeke was alone in this, armed only with his innate wisdom, Sarah's forgotten lessons, and the raw truth of his land. The next few hours were a whirlwind of focused chaos. Zeke, despite his age, moved with a surprising energy, his directions clear and precise. He didn't use technical jargon. Instead, he used analogies from farm life, from the rhythms of nature, that the crew, initially baffled, slowly began to understand. No, not so much light there. Zeke instructed the head lighting technician, a young man named Alex, who bristled initially at taking orders from a farmer. Think of it like a storm cloud. Alex, you want that patch of darkness, that heavy shadow, to weigh on the frame. It's not about illumination. It's about mood. The sun's too bright right now. We need to work with the natural light, not against it. You use those old barn doors, half closed, to filter it, like a squint. He showed the production designer, a meticulous woman named Brenda, how to position a battered, long-abandoned wagon wheel to frame a distant shot of the horizon, creating a profound sense of isolation and vastness. That wheel ain't just a prop, ma'am, he explained, his voice patient. It's the circle of life, the never-ending struggle. You put it there, and it tells a story without a single word. The camera operator, a seasoned veteran named Leo, initially scoffed at Zeke's suggestions, accustomed to complex dollies and crane shots, but Zeke simply told him, Leo, you get down low, feel the earth, see it from the perspective of a man who's lost everything but his feet on this land. The camera's his eyes. Let it linger on the dry cracks in the soil. That's where the heartbreak is. Victor Hayes observed with a growing sense of unease. He had anticipated Zeke's failure, a quick capitulation. Instead, the old man was weaving a strange, compelling magic. Victor, ever the schemer, decided to intervene. He subtly approached Brad, his assistant, whispering instructions. Go loosen the connection on the auxiliary power unit powering their floodlights. Just enough so it flickers. Make it look like old wiring. His plan was to subtly sabotage the makeshift set, making it appear that Zeke's reliance on natural methods was impractical and unreliable, thus reinforcing his own argument about the need for modern, controllable equipment. Just as Zeke was guiding Leo through a subtle camera pan, emphasizing the slow, painful departure of a family depicted by two extras acting out the scene, the lights on the small-sized portable floodlight rig began to flicker erratically, then sputtered out completely. A collective groan went up from the crew. "See," Victor exclaimed, a triumphant smirk returning to his face. "I told you this place was a problem. Old wiring, unreliable power. We can't run a professional set like this. We need to bring in proper generators, rewire everything." Which, of course, adds significantly to our costs. Mr. Thorne. He looked pointedly at the bank representatives, who remained impassive. The clock was ticking. The 3-hour deadline was rapidly approaching. Zeke looked at the dead lights, then at Victor's smug face. He saw the subtle flicker in Brad's eyes, a nervous glance towards Victor, confirming his suspicions of sabotage. A wave of frustration, mingled with despair, washed over him. It looked like everything was about to fall apart. But then, a memory, sharp and vivid, flashed in his mind. Sarah, sitting by the window in their study, sketching the play of moonlight on the old barn. She'd talked about found light, about the moments when nature itself provided the perfect illumination, often in unexpected ways. And he remembered her telling him, "Zeke, sometimes the best light is the one you don't have to pay for, the one that tells the truest story." He looked up at the sky. The sun, though still high, was beginning its slow descent, its light already shifting, lengthening. And then he saw it. A specific, fleeting angle of sunlight bouncing off the weathered aluminum roof of the chicken coop, just 20 yards away. It wasn't direct, but a soft, reflective glow, a subtle fill light that could transform the scene. It was a trick of light, a gift from the land itself, a detail only someone intimately familiar with the farm, with its every nuanced angle and reflection, would ever notice. "No need for those fancy lights, Mr. Hayes," Zeke said, his voice ringing with a new authority. "The land provides its own—" Leo, angle the camera slightly to the west. "And Brenda, move that old water trough just a foot to the left. The light reflecting off the aluminum roof of the coop. That's our fill. It'll give us the soft melancholy we need." The crew exchanged bewildered glances, but Amelia, with a look of dawning comprehension and excitement, quickly nodded. "Do it," she urged them. Leo adjusted the camera. Brenda moved the trough. The scene, bathed in this unexpected, natural glow, immediately took on a profound, almost spiritual quality. The details of the dusty ground, the worn clothes of the extras, the quiet despair in their posture, all were suddenly heightened, rendered with a raw, undeniable authenticity. Victor's face, initially smug, twisted into a mask of confused fury. He had tried to sabotage, but Zeke had turned his trick into a triumph, using the very elements of the farm that Victor scorned. The clock was still ticking, but the impossible seemed within reach. The last rays of the setting sun, transformed by Zeke's intuitive genius, cast a haunting, ethereal glow upon the mock-up set. The scene, meant to embody the brutal departure of a family from their dust-choked home, was now bathed in a soft, melancholic light that seemed to emanate from the very soul of the land. The camera, expertly handled by Leo under Zeke's precise, almost poetic guidance, slowly panned across the meticulously arranged elements the weathered wagon wheel, framing the desolate horizon, the dry, cracked earth, now appearing as a canvas of unspoken despair, and the two extras, their backs to the camera, embodying the profound sorrow of leaving everything behind. Victor Hayes, his face a mask of disbelief, watched as the scene unfolded, his carefully orchestrated sabotage. The flickering lights meant to expose Zeke's impractical methods had been effortlessly circumvented by the old man's profound understanding of natural light. Victor had relied on technology, Zeke had relied on wisdom. The sight of the improvised fill light from the chicken coop's aluminum roof, creating the exact soft melancholy Zeke had envisioned, made Victor's stomach churn with a mixture of impotent rage and dawning fear. This wasn't just an old farmer, this was a natural artist, and Victor was losing control of the narrative. The 3-hour deadline, set with such malicious intent by Victor, was now upon them. Brad, Victor's assistant, nervously checked his tablet, the timer blinking red. Cut Isabella Rossi's voice, usually sharp and authoritative, was now tinged with a tremor of awe. The crew immediately ceased their movements, the quiet of the Nebraska evening settling back in. Isabella walked slowly towards the set, her eyes fixed on the scene. She didn't speak for a long moment, simply observing, absorbing the profound emotional resonance of the tableau Zeke had created. The air was thick with anticipation. The bank representatives, usually so detached, found themselves inexplicably drawn into the raw, cinematic beauty before them. Even Mr. Harrison, the stern bank manager, shifted uncomfortably, a flicker of something akin to wonder in his eyes. Amelia Vance, her breath caught in her throat, watched Isabella intently. She had believed in Zeke, but even she hadn't anticipated such a breathtaking outcome. The scene was not just technically perfect, it was emotionally devastating, capturing the very essence of the Dust Bowl era with a purity that defied the makeshift nature of the set. Finally, Isabella turned to Zeke, her eyes shining with an almost reverent admiration. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. That was extraordinary. You didn't just create a scene. You evoked a memory. You understood the emotional truth of the moment, the way the light and the landscape tell a story." She extended her hand, her gaze unwavering. "Thank you. Truly." A collective gasp swept through the crew. This was high praise from Isabella Rossi, a director known for her uncompromising artistic standards. Leo, the camera operator, walked over to Zeke, his initial skepticism replaced by genuine awe. "Mr. Thorne, I've been in this business for 30 years. I've worked with the best. What you just did, that was pure magic. You see light in a way I've never witnessed." He shook Zeke's hand, a look of profound respect on his face. Brenda, the production designer, echoed his sentiments, her voice thick with admiration. Victor Hayes, however, was a study in controlled fury. His face was pale, his jaw clenched so tightly a muscle twitched in his cheek. He had failed. Not only had Zeke not buckled under pressure, he had brilliantly outmaneuvered Victor's sabotage, proving his unique value in a way no amount of money could buy. Victor tried to interject, to salvage some shred of his authority. Well, it was interesting, but perhaps not quite practical for a full-scale production. The time constraints, the reliance on unpredictable natural light. "Enough, Victor." Isabella cut him off, her voice suddenly sharp, devoid of its earlier warmth. She turned to face him, her gaze like steel. This was practical. This was genius. And your attempts to undermine it, to sabotage the setup, did not go unnoticed. She had seen Brad's nervous glances, overheard hushed whispers from other crew members who were tired of Victor's underhanded tactics. Your position as production manager is contingent on trust, professionalism, and supporting the artistic vision. You have demonstrated none of these qualities today. In fact, you have actively tried to obstruct the creative process and mislead the bank representatives. Victor's eyes widened in shock. He looked frantically at Brad, who immediately shrunk back, avoiding eye contact. He then looked at the silent bank representatives, their expressions now clearly disapproving, and the murmuring crew members, whose quiet respect for Zeke was now matched by their open disdain for Victor. Effective immediately. "Mr. Hayes, your services are no longer required," Isabella stated, her voice cold and decisive. "You are dismissed from Dust Bowl Requiem. Mr. Davies will escort you off the property." The hulking head of security stepped forward, his grim face leaving no room for argument. Victor spluttered, "You can't, I have a contract, I'll sue. This is outrageous," but his protests were drowned out by the quiet, resolute movements of Mr. Davies, who firmly, but politely, guided him towards the sleek black SUV. Victor Hayes, the avaricious schemer, was unceremoniously expelled from the very production he had sought to control and exploit. His ambition, once his greatest asset, had become his undoing, leaving him with nothing but a shattered reputation and the bitter taste of public humiliation. As Victor's SUV disappeared down the dusty road, a palpable wave of relief swept over the remaining crew. The tension that had hung heavy in the air lifted, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose and camaraderie. Mr. Harrison, the bank representative, cleared his throat. He looked at the perfectly rendered scene, then at Zeke, a new respect evident in his demeanor. "Mr. Thorne," he began, his voice surprisingly gentle, "I must admit, I have never witnessed anything quite like that. The bank. We understand the unique value of this property, given the unexpected developments, and the clear potential your farm holds for this major production. We are prepared to reevaluate our position." He paused, then continued, a hint of awe in his voice. "We would like to offer you a new mortgage agreement, a significant reduction in your payments, a substantial grace period, and, if you agree to this production, we would even consider a long-term partnership, positioning the Thorne homestead as a dedicated film location for future projects." He placed the foreclosure papers back into his briefcase, his earlier urgency replaced by an eagerness to collaborate. Zeke could barely believe his ears. The words were a lifeline, a reprieve, a triumph beyond his wildest hopes. The farm was saved. Meanwhile, back in Harmony Creek, news of Zeke's miraculous turn of fortune and Victor Hayes's dramatic downfall spread like wildfire. Earl Johnson, who had been tirelessly spreading rumors about Zeke's supposed senility and avarice, found himself facing the silent, reproachful stares of his neighbors. The very people he had tried to sway now saw him for what he was, a petty, envious man. He heard whispers of Zeke Thorne, the movie man, and Earl Johnson, the backstabbing gossip. His own reputation, built on a foundation of shrewdness, crumbled under the weight of his own malice. Earl, consumed by a rare pang of guilt and shame, eventually sought Zeke out. He found Zeke on his porch, watching the last of the film crew pack up for the day, Amelia beside him. "Zeke," Earl began, his voice gruff, uncharacteristically hesitant. I heard what happened. About the movie. And about Victor Hayes. And about what I said." He looked down at his worn boots, unable to meet Zeke's gaze. "I was wrong. Zeke, I was way out of line. I let my jealousy get the better of me. This farm, your place, it's special. And you're something special too. I'm sorry, old friend." He extended a calloused hand. "If there's anything I can do, anything at all, to help you with the farm, you just say the word." Zeke looked at Earl, his eyes holding no judgment, only a quiet understanding. He took Earl's outstretched hand, a firm, honest grip. "Water under the bridge. Earl, we all make mistakes. What matters is what we do next." It was a quiet act of forgiveness, a reclamation of community spirit. The new calm that settled over the Thorne homestead was unlike any Zeke had known before. It wasn't the quiet of loneliness, but the quiet of peace, of vindication. His farm, once teetering on the edge of oblivion, was now reborn, a vibrant canvas for cinematic dreams. He had not only saved his legacy, but, in doing so, had finally unleashed the dormant artistic spirit that Sarah had cherished. A spirit that now, through him, would illuminate the silver screen. The dust settled, quite literally, over the Thorne homestead. But it was no longer the dust of neglect and despair. It was the dust of activity, of creation, of a new future blooming on ancient soil. The immediate aftermath of Victor Hayes's dramatic dismissal and the bank's miraculous turnaround saw the Thorne homestead transform into a bustling film set. Tractors, once symbols of arduous labor, were moved to make way for massive lighting rigs. The fields, once parched and fallow, now provided the authentic backdrop for Dust Bowl Requiem, a film that promised to capture the raw spirit of resilience against impossible odds. Zeke Thorne, the old farmer who had nearly lost everything, was no longer just the property owner. Isabella Rossi, deeply impressed by his uncanny eye and profound understanding of cinematic truth, insisted he be brought on as a full-time consultant for the film. He wasn't just a figurehead, he was an invaluable asset. He walked the land with the production designers, pointing out how the angle of an aging fence post could create a more poignant silhouette against the dawn, or how the specific texture of a sun-baked rock could convey the harshness of the era. He guided the lighting crew, not with technical jargon, but with poetic metaphors about the sky's moods and the sun's silent stories. He became the film's living, breathing heart, ensuring every frame resonated with the authenticity he knew so intimately. This new role was more than just a source of income. Though the substantial consultant fees quickly paid off the remaining debts and ensured the farm's long-term financial stability, it was, crucially, a profound validation. It was the recognition of Sarah's unspoken dreams, a testament to her keen artistic sensibility that had lived on, quietly nurtured, within Zeke for decades. Every time he offered an insight, every time a camera captured a scene precisely as he envisioned it, he felt Sarah's presence, a warmth spreading through him. Her passion, once a private sorrow, was now a public celebration. One afternoon, as the crew broke for lunch, Zeke found himself sharing a quiet moment with Amelia Vance. They sat on the farmhouse porch, the same porch where he had faced Victor's contempt, now bustling with caterers and crew members. The scent of hot coffee mingled with the fresh country air. "You know, Zeke," Amelia began, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. "When I first arrived, I saw a rundown farm and an old man teetering on the edge. I saw a location. But you showed me a masterpiece. You showed me the soul of this place, the stories hidden in every cracked board and every grain of dust." Zeke chuckled softly, a rare, genuine sound. "Well, you were the one who had the eyes to see it. Amelia, most folks, they just see what they expect to see. You looked deeper. You taught me to look deeper," she corrected, her eyes earnest. "I thought I knew everything about filmmaking, all the technical terms, the latest equipment. But you taught me about essence, about finding the truth in simplicity, about how sometimes the most profound effects come from knowing how to listen to the land, to the light. It's a lesson no film school could ever teach." She paused, a thoughtful expression on her face. "And you taught me about resilience, about fighting for what you believe in, even when everyone else dismisses you." Her gaze softened. "I heard about Earl Johnson and what he was saying in town." Zeke nodded. "Earl came by, made amends. He's been helping me with the crops. Actually, surprised me how much he knows about dryland farming." Amelia smiled. "That's the thing about truth, isn't it? It has a way of cutting through the noise. Victor's downfall, your success. It cleared the air, didn't it? Not just here, but in the town too." Indeed. The transformation in Harmony Creek was almost as remarkable as the one at the Thorne homestead. Earl Johnson, initially Zeke's most vocal detractor, had become his staunchest ally. After his public apology, driven by a genuine pang of shame and a newfound respect for Zeke's quiet strength, Earl began to actively defend Zeke against any lingering skepticism. He'd proudly declare at the diner, "That old Zeke, he's a genius. Knows more about movie making than those fancy city folk combined." He'd even bring over surplus hay or offer his heavier machinery for tasks Zeke's aging equipment couldn't handle, silently making amends for his past slanders. The town, witnessing the undeniable prosperity brought by the film crew. Local businesses thriving, jobs created, quickly embraced Zeke as their unassuming hero. Their initial prejudices, rooted in fear and small-town gossip, melted away in the face of undeniable success and Zeke's unwavering humility. The daily rhythm of the film set, though initially jarring, soon became a natural part of Zeke's life. He found himself conversing easily with the cast and crew, sharing stories of farm life and offering insights that enriched their performances. The lead actor, portraying the stoic farmer, spent hours with Zeke, learning to walk with his gait, to understand the subtle nuances of his calloused hands. The young actress playing his daughter learned about the resilience of farm women, drawing inspiration from Sarah's hidden legacy. The film, Dust Bowl Requiem, became more than just a movie. It became a collaborative effort, a testament to the unexpected fusion of Hollywood glamour and heartland authenticity. Isabella Rossi often marveled at Zeke's intuitive grasp of cinematic storytelling. He would point out a particular pattern of cracks in the old well, noting how they could symbolize the breaking spirit of the land, or suggest a subtle camera movement that mirrored the slow, arduous process of a farmer tilling an unyielding field. His input wasn't just technical, it was deeply emotional, adding layers of meaning that transcended the script. During one particularly challenging scene, where the lead actor had to convey immense despair with a single glance at the parched horizon, the crew struggled to achieve the desired effect. Isabella was frustrated. The actor was visibly strained. Zeke, observing from a distance, walked over quietly. "Son," he said to the actor, his voice low, "you ain't just looking at dirt. You're looking at your whole life, drying up. You're looking at ghosts, your grandpappy, your daddy, every seed you ever planted, and they're all telling you it's over. Feel that in your gut. Let it churn. Then, let your eyes carry the weight." The actor, a seasoned professional, stared at Zeke, then slowly nodded. He took a deep breath, and when Isabella called action, his gaze at the horizon was no longer just acting. It was raw, gut-wrenching despair, imbued with the unspoken history Zeke had invoked. Isabella, watching through the monitor, had tears in her eyes. It was a perfect, unforgettable take. Thanks to Zeke's profound guidance, the resolution for Zeke was not just about financial stability, but about the profound recognition of his, and Sarah's, unique value. The Thorne homestead was no longer just a farm. It was now a living, breathing set, a canvas for storytelling. The bank, seeing the immense public relations value and the potential for a long-term revenue stream, renegotiated the loan into an incredibly favorable partnership, making the farm a permanent, iconic location for future productions, especially those seeking authentic American rural backdrops. Zeke, once facing destitution, now had an income stream that would secure the homestead for generations, far beyond what traditional farming could ever provide. More importantly, he had found his purpose, not in clinging to the past, but in bringing it to life, sharing its truth with the world through the lens of a camera. He had become a bridge between the heartland and Hollywood, a guardian of forgotten stories, and a testament to the enduring power of dreams, even those that had to wait a lifetime to bloom. 1 decade later, the Thorne Vance Canine Institute stood as a monumental testament to Lucas Thorne's enduring vision and a thriving hub of compassion, innovation, and unwavering dedication to animal welfare. What had begun as a nascent dream, born from a desperate search for a stolen dog, had blossomed into a sprawling, world-renowned complex, harmoniously nestled into the serene, rolling landscape of upstate New York. The initial cluster of buildings had undergone significant expansion, now incorporating a state-of-the-art veterinary hospital equipped with the latest diagnostic and surgical technologies. Advanced behavioral research laboratories where leading scientists probed the mysteries of animal cognition, and expansive naturalistic habitats where hundreds of rescued dogs, once abandoned, abused, or traumatized, lived lives of profound dignity, joy, and purpose. The Institute had rapidly ascended to become a global leader in canine rehabilitation, Its groundbreaking methodologies and compassionate approaches adopted and emulated by countless shelters and animal welfare organizations across continents. Lucas, no longer simply known as the CEO's son, but now widely recognized as a globally celebrated philanthropist, a pioneering authority on animal behavior, and an inspiring advocate, moved through the bustling corridors and verdant grounds of the Institute with an effortless grace. His inherently quiet and reflective demeanor remained, yet it was now powerfully infused with an undeniable sense of self-assurance, a quiet confidence, and an aura of profound, unwavering purpose. His days were a whirlwind of diverse activities, seamlessly blending high-level administrative responsibilities with hands-on engagement. He meticulously oversaw complex research projects delving into the intricacies of canine PTSD and anxiety, consulted on intricate international animal rescue missions that required delicate negotiation and strategic planning, and, most importantly, dedicated significant hands-on time to working directly with the dogs, particularly those with the most challenging behavioral issues or the deepest emotional scars. He still possessed that uncanny, almost preternatural ability to connect with them, to decipher their subtle cues, their almost imperceptible body language, and to understand their silent, intricate language that only he seemed to fully comprehend. The once dismissed hobby, derided as a trivial pursuit, had unequivocally become his life's profound work, a powerful and unwavering force for good in a world often blind to the suffering of its most vulnerable creatures. His relationship with his father, Robert Thorne, had undergone a complete and transformative metamorphosis. Robert, now having transitioned into a semi-retired role from the demanding day-to-day operations of Thorne Industries, had dedicated a significant portion of his considerable time, formidable intellect, and the company's vast financial and logistical resources to the Institute. He served with unwavering commitment on its influential board of directors, actively spearheaded major fundraising campaigns, leveraging his extensive network, and, most tellingly, frequently visited Lucas at the Institute, no longer simply as a corporate benefactor, but as a genuinely engaged father, profoundly interested and immensely proud of his son's extraordinary and impactful work. The corporation itself, under Lucas's subtle but persistent influence and Robert's gradually evolving perspective, had embraced a new, more holistic identity. Thorne Industries was no longer merely a symbol of ruthless capitalism and cutthroat business acumen. It was now widely recognized and respected for its extensive and impactful philanthropic endeavors, particularly its pioneering investments in animal welfare initiatives and sustainable environmental practices. The very fabric of the Thorne legacy had indeed been irrevocably redefined, not through the traditional narrative of a single heir inheriting and expanding a corporate empire, but rather through a son who had courageously carved out a new, compassionate, and deeply meaningful path, elevating the family name through acts of genuine kindness, profound empathy, and widespread positive impact, rather than through mere conquest or accumulation of wealth. Eleanor Vance, now well into her vibrant 90s, remained an honored, cherished, and beloved matriarchal figure at the Institute. She spent her days in a small, sunlit office, specifically designed to offer serene views of the sprawling dog habitats, surrounded by meticulously arranged photographs of her champion poodles, each a testament to her lifelong dedication. She continued to offer invaluable wisdom and gentle, insightful guidance to Lucas and the Institute's staff, her mind still sharp, her passion undimmed. Duchess, now a venerable elder stateswoman of the canine world, aged gracefully but still radiating a regal aura, often dozed peacefully at Eleanor's feet, her white fur still shimmering, a living legend and a tangible, heart-stirring link to the Institute's profound origin story. Eleanor watched Lucas with immense satisfaction and an almost maternal pride, knowing with absolute certainty that her life's work, her legacy of devotion to the poodle breed and to animal welfare, would continue to flourish and expand exponentially in his incredibly capable and compassionate hands. Miller, the once skeptical, pragmatic private investigator, had transitioned from a reluctant collaborator to Lucas's steadfast, deeply trusted friend and confidant. He often joined Lucas for coffee at the Institute's charming, pet-friendly cafe, exchanging stories, observations, and wry insights into the complexities of both human and animal nature. Inspired by his transformative experience with Lucas and Duchess, Miller had even established a small, highly effective, pro bono unit within his own successful private investigation agency, exclusively dedicated to investigating complex animal cruelty and theft cases, a direct and profound result of his deeply impactful collaboration with Lucas. "You opened my eyes, kid," he'd often quip, a rare, genuine smile gracing his usually stoic features. "Turns out, there's more to life than just catching human creeps. Sometimes, it's about saving the furry ones too. And that, my friend, is a far more noble pursuit." Lucas, however, with all his success and public adulation, never once forgot the stinging mockery, the dismissive sneers, and the profound isolation of his early life. These bitter memories served not as sources of resentment, but as powerful, constant reminders of the crucial importance of empathy, radical acceptance, and the inherent dignity of every living being. It was this deep-seated understanding that spurred him to establish the Whispers and Woofs Scholarship Program at the Institute, a unique and groundbreaking initiative. This program actively sought out and nurtured young individuals who demonstrated an innate, almost intuitive connection with animals, much like his own profound gift. These were often children from marginalized communities or underprivileged backgrounds, frequently overlooked or dismissed by traditional education systems, but whose quiet observations, boundless compassion, and natural rapport with animals marked them as future leaders and innovators in the burgeoning field of animal welfare. Lucas personally dedicated significant time to mentoring these aspiring young animal advocates, teaching them not just about the intricacies of animal behavior and welfare, but, more importantly, about the inherent power of their own unique perspectives, empowering them to trust their instincts, to embrace their empathy, and to leverage their profound gifts for the greater good. He often brought them to visit the very places he had once volunteered, like the original Paws of Hope shelter in Brooklyn, demonstrating that true value and profound impact often resided in the simplest, most overlooked acts of kindness and the deepest forms of connection. He frequently shared the compelling story of Duchess, not as a simplistic tale of his personal heroism, but rather as a profound parable of the power of observation, the triumph of empathy, and the quiet dignity of intuition. Sometimes, he would tell his eager students, his voice soft but resonating with deep conviction, "The most important clues in life aren't the loudest. They're the quiet whispers, the almost invisible details, the subtle nuances that only those who truly listen with their hearts and minds can hear. Don't ever, for a single moment, let anyone tell you that your sensitivity, your empathy, or your unique way of seeing the world is a weakness. It is, in fact, your most profound and enduring strength." The final lasting image of Lucas Thorne was not that of a powerful CEO in a gleaming skyscraper office, nor a stern philanthropist on a podium, but of a man at profound peace, deeply and harmoniously connected to his life's ultimate purpose. It was a warm, golden, late afternoon at the Institute. The last vestiges of the setting sun filtered through the rustling branches of an ancient, gnarled oak tree, casting long, dancing shadows across a meticulously manicured, verdant lawn. Lucas sat cross-legged on the soft grass, a small, incredibly timid terrier mix, rescued just weeks prior from a harrowing situation, slowly, tentatively, inching closer to him. The dog, its past filled with unimaginable fear and neglect, finally, after endless patience from Lucas, rested its small, scarred head in Lucas's lap, a soft, profound sigh escaping its tiny chest, a sound of utter surrender and burgeoning trust. Lucas, with an almost imperceptible touch, gently stroked its matted fur, a silent, profound understanding passing between them, a bridge built of compassion and unspoken promises. Above them, a flock of migratory birds, sang a harmonious, joyful chorus as they soared toward the horizon. And in the distance, the happy, unrestrained barks of countless rehabilitated dogs echoed, a vibrant symphony of hope, healing, and boundless, unconditional love. It was a picture of quiet triumph, of a legacy redefined not by the fleeting measures of wealth or power, but by the profound, enduring, and unspoken connection between a man and the creatures he was destined to protect and understand. If this story stirred your heart, if it reminds you that courage can alter destinies and that light always finds a path even in the deepest darkness, please leave a comment. Share this story with those who need inspiration. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to never miss our upcoming stories.